Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Valerie Dudley. I'm the Director of Multicultural Education and Training for the Office of Institutional Diversity, Equity, Advocacy, and Leadership. In the role of Director of Multicultural Education, I'm responsible for designing, developing, and conducting diversity education programs for faculty and staff here at Temple University. I want to welcome you to Got 15 Minutes, How to Respond When Someone Makes an Offensive Comment at Work. Your colleague says something that immediately makes you feel uncomfortable. He thinks he's just being funny, but the comment is inappropriate, maybe even offensive, sexist, or racist. Occasionally, we all hear things said by colleagues, clients, and even our own bosses that offend our sense of right and wrong. The question arises, at what point do we speak up? Is there a way to draw attention to the comment without putting the other person on the defensive? Staying silent in the face of a demeaning comment, stereotypes, or biases allows these attitudes and behaviors to thrive. This undermines our ability to create an inclusive workplace where all employees are welcome, treated with respect, and are able to do their best work. Yet most employees and leaders who want to speak up don't know how, so we end up saying nothing. In Emotional Intelligence, Daniel Goleman captures the consequences of not speaking up. The simple act of naming a bias as such or objecting to it on the spot establishes a social atmosphere that discourages it. Saying nothing serves to condone it. Well, what should we say or do if you find yourself in this situation? Well, hopefully this webinar will present some strategies that you can use to respond when someone makes an offensive statement in the workplace. I want to start with defining the definition for stereotypes. A stereotype is an oversimplified image or statement applied to a whole group of people without regard for the individual. Stereotypes imply all people in the group are identical, based on some dimension of diversity they share. Stereotypes often contain a judgment, such as good or bad, honest or dishonest, hardworking or lazy. Offensive comments, insults, slights, slurs are often based on stereotypes, and they fall into the category of what we term as microaggressions. Microaggressions are the brief and commonplace daily verbal and environmental indignities. They are intentional or unintentional, and they communicate derogatory or negative slights and insults toward women, people of color, people of different religions or sexual orientations, and disabilities. These exchanges are so pervasive and automatic in daily conversation and interactions that they are often dismissed or glossed over as being innocent and innocuous. But they have a harmful and unpleasant psychological impact on the target person or group. Some of the consequences of microaggressions. Microaggressions create hostile and invalidating environments. It happens to lower work production and the problem-solving abilities of team members. It creates anxiety, paranoia, the sense of worthlessness, and the loss of drive. Microaggressions create physical health problems such as stress and illness. It impacts the mental health of victims of microaggressions by producing depression and anxiety in the individual. Now, what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit about some of the steps that you can use to help you speak up. First off, The first one is figure out why the remark upsets you. Does the statement reflect a pattern of discriminatory attitudes or behaviors? Or is it just a lone act of poor judgment? Think about the best way to achieve your objectives. What's at stake here? Perhaps it's better to wait and discuss the remark later. Ask yourself, what do you want to accomplish by speaking up? Is there something that you can say that could actually change the speaker's behavior or attitude? Step number 2 is assume good intent and explain the impact. If you decide to say something, approach the situation as if the person didn't mean to offend you. Most of the time, the person is just clueless and doesn't know how their behavior is being interpreted. Be compassionate. Chances are you've made mistakes too. We have all made stupid comments, for sure. We are not perfect either. We have all said things that we wish you could take back. Explaining that you've been in a similar situation may make the person feel less defensive and more open to hearing your perspective. Instead of labeling the comment as offensive, explain how it makes you feel. You might say, I know it wasn't your intent, but that made me feel uncomfortable. Or saying, I'm confused by what you said. Don't think of this as sidestepping the issue. You're not. It's a much more effective approach that is more likely to change their behavior in future situations. Now, if the person doesn't think their comment was offensive, you can help educate them by offering an observation or more information. For example, if the person suggested that your female colleague is slacking off by leaving work early, you might say something like this. Now, I read an interesting study the other day that found that when women, working moms, leave the office, we assume they're taking care of their kids. But when working dads leave the office, we don't even notice. It's important to do this in a way that isn't passive-aggressive. The more genuine you are about sharing information and not trapping the person in their bias, the more likely they are to hear you. Step number 3, ask a question. Asking questions can offer help discover the source of inappropriate comments. Sometimes a question is the best comeback to an offensive remark. For instance, you might try, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Could you please explain? Step number 4 is interrupt and redirect. Interrupting and redirecting is a strategy that you use to pause the conversation and to possibly switch to another topic, and then maybe open it up for further discussion. By interrupting the conversation, it allows the person to realize that you're not allowing them to continue on the topic that they're going forward with. Step number 5, broaden to universal human behavior. Make a statement that you think it applies to everyone and not just a specific group or person. You can say, I don't think that it's a woman thing, but I think that could apply to everyone. That's just an example. Number 6, make it individual. You can start by asking them, are you speaking of someone in particular? It helps them to see that the statement that they just made is a generalization about a group of people. When possible, relate the disrespectful behavior to your own personal experiences. Step number 7, Present the data. If you are offended by a claim you know to be untrue, gather evidence to support your own point of view. Make co-workers aware that stereotypes, whether cultural or ethnic, are offensive. Even positive stereotypes are offensive. And then help them understand why. And number 8, enlist the support of someone else. Sometimes we all need help, need a helping hand. Sometimes it's hard to respond when there's a power dynamic taking place. If it's your boss or a colleague that makes the repeated offensive remarks, maybe you can marshal help from a colleague or another administrator and think about meeting to discuss the pattern with others who will support your position. Sometimes you may be able to get another supervisor or manager who may be a friend of your supervisor to talk to them and explain what's going on and why you may be feeling offended and upset. Here's some other principles I'd like you to remember. Respond right away, calmly and rationally. Sometimes that's a little difficult. Sometimes you need to think and reflect a little bit. But if you don't respond shortly after the situation has occurred, the likelihood of coming back, it still exists, but the person may not really remember what they said. And so when you can call them on it right away, that is very helpful. Help co-workers understand why something is offensive. Question whether expressing certain opinions is appropriate in the workplace setting. Let co-workers know that some behavior is inappropriate. Always take responsibility for your own actions. And never be afraid to apologize. Explore similarities instead of differences. Oftentimes, we really focus on how we're different from one another and not really focusing on the ways that we have so many things in common. That helps when you're talking about enhancing a more welcoming and inclusive workplace. Focus on the similarities. Consider people as individuals. Intervene before a problem escalates. When possible, try to diffuse the tensions and do it by listening and understanding. Relate disrespectful behavior to some of your own personal experiences. Give them examples of what you mean and what you've experienced. Always use respectful language no matter who's around. Don't cross boundaries in emotionally charged situations. And listen to and be understanding of concerns of others. And again, my favorite saying, never be afraid to apologize. Saying I'm sorry goes a long way. Helps people understand that you really do care. Here are some examples of situations and how you might respond. Someone makes a joke involving an offensive stereotype at work or in a social setting. Your response could be, I don't feel comfortable with that kind of humor. Or, I'm offended, and or I think someone here might have felt offended as well. Or situation 2, you hear someone make a cruel remark about someone while they're crossing the campus, and the person that they were talking about has seemed to overhear them. Respond, I'm sure you didn't mean it, but that could be hurtful to the person that you were directing that towards. Here are some of the reference materials and other articles and websites that you can look at to find more information in regards to this topic. We're going to be offering diversity workshops starting in this month in April. The first one will be It's as Simple as Respect, and that will be on April the 5th, 2018 at 10 o'clock in the Ideal Lecture Hall. Then we'll also have Difficult Conversations Communicating with Respect in a Diverse World. That's going to be April 19th. The next one is Impact of Microaggressions. That's May 3rd. And Being a Better